what this does, it tends to disempower people and accelerate poverty. The second problem is that although empowerment is important in community development, there is difficulty in measuring. It is mostly understood as a process, but usually measured as an outcome. Why? Because outcomes of empowerment like employment, income levels, and education level are easy to quantify, but as a process, empowerment is described as a qualitative and moving target, which is difficult to capture using quantitative methods. So the purpose of this qualitative case study research was to examine the development of personal or psychological and interpersonal empowerment within the context of a community-led initiative to improve public education in a rural northwest Tanzanian village we called Tuungane in this study. The study had two research questions. The first question focused on the community-led initiative, how it was implemented. And the second question focused on how the community partners expressed a sense of empowerment after participation in the initiative. The community-led initiative provided the context within which empowerment was examined. Why? Because empowerment does not happen in a vacuum. And so we started in 2017 by conducting a community needs soil assets assessment. Given information from the literature, we already knew what poor communities go through in terms of poverty issues. But here we were focused mostly on what assets in the community that would facilitate the sustainable community development. So in this needs assessment, we asked that particular question you see on the screen. What we found out was not only that the people lamented the lack of collaboration, but there was this strong desire and willingness to collaborate. Now, as you see on the screen, reading in the statement from one of the participants, two concepts came up which were sharing ideas and participation. What we interpreted this to mean is that the poor people understand that they have something to contribute in the development process, but they just need opportunity to participate. Now, based on these findings, we designed the initiative to integrate three theories, which I will explain briefly in the next slides. So asset-based community development recognizes local people not as mere beneficiaries, but as critical partners in the development process. The second one, community-based participatory research, is a strategy which is grounded in the principles and outcomes of individual and community empowerment, collaboration, and sustainable social change. The third one, school, family, community partnerships, emphasizes the concepts of parenting, communication, learning, volunteering, decision-making, and collaboration. Putting these theories together, we assumed that the initiative would facilitate collaboration and lead into a sense of empowerment. Now, for the study to measure empowerment, self-determination theory was adopted. This theory guided data collection, analysis, and interpretation. It is grounded in human agency and motivation, or the concept of why people do what they do. It argues that people are naturally agentic and proactive, but they can also be passive and alienated. So the question is, why these differences? Well, this theory examines the causes of these differences. It concludes that human vitality or apathy occurs largely because of the social contextual conditions in which people develop and function. It is based or presents that human beings have three innate basic psychological needs of relatedness, competence, and autonomy. It further presents this continuum from non-self-determined to self-determined behavior. And what this means, the argument here is, as you can see on the right side from at the bottom, the argument is that for a person to feel self-determined or act out of intrinsic motivation, the three innate basic psychological needs must be simultaneously nurtured and satisfied. Now, In order to answer the research questions, a qualitative case study research was conducted, which allowed to examine or measure empowerment as a process within the context of the initiative. Why? Because psychological empowerment has been described as an open-ended, subjective, qualitative, developmental, and psychological construct with an intrinsic value. So the study and the initiative were conducted in a small rural village near Lake Victoria in northwest Tanzania. At the time of the study, about 3,000 people resided in the village and were mostly engaged in subsistence farming, and therefore would be classified as living in conditions of poverty. For participants or community partners, as we call them in this study, we had 3 groups: parents, teachers, and community leaders. The data sources included interviews conducted after the initiative was completed, drawings or visualizations from the participants to visualize how they understood empowerment and collaboration. We also had videotaped focus group discussion from the initiative, photographs, and field notes taken by the research. This figure is very busy, but it presents the timeline of the initiative and the study. One thing I want to point out here is the methods used to collect the data during the initiative. These were participatory video with the most significant change within responsive evaluation with an emergent design. What these methods did was to provide the structure for implementing the initiative, but also allowing for the application of the 3 theories in action. Data analysis was conducted in 2 stages. The first one was to describe the community initiative, how it was undertaken from the beginning to the end. And the second stage was to identify evidence of empowerment based on self-determination theoretical concepts, theoretical propositions. The continuum we just saw on the previous slide guided data analysis and interpretation, focusing on the direction from non-self-determined to self-determined behavior, all acting out of a sense of intrinsic motivation. Pattern matching and cross-case analysis and synthesis is the technique used from a case study method to achieve 2 goals. One was to link the case study evidence to self-determination theoretical concepts of interest, which are the 3 basic psychological needs: relatedness, competence, and autonomy. And the second was to develop the case study description and build explanation for the development and the achievement of empowerment. The first question focused on the community-led initiative, which has been described in the dissertation document, but the study was itself focused on empowerment, and therefore the findings presented here will focus on the second question, which focused on how the community partners expressed a sense of empowerment after participation in the initiative. The findings are divided in 2 parts. The first one has to do with the personal or psychological empowerment, where we were able to develop 3 themes. The first one, Umoja ni Nguvu, which is a Swahili statement meaning unity is power, was reflective of relatedness. The second, ninaweza kufanya hiki, or I can do this, reflected competence. And nilishiriki kwa hiari, it was my choice. This was representative of a sense of autonomy. Before we go deep into the findings, let me explain one thing. After the initiative, we conducted interviews with all the participants, and 3 of the major questions asked were: 1, when you think and reflect about the initiative and your participation, what can you say? The second one was, why did you decide to participate? And the third one was, how did you feel about collaborating with others? So, for the first theme about relatedness, this statement from one of the community leaders, we call her Hester in this study, really captured the sense of relatedness. And as you read it on the screen, the way we interpreted this was that in a community where you have groups that might have different opinions, but also power imbalance, you need for each group to understand the needs of another group in order to facilitate collaboration and therefore empowerment. The second theme about competence was expressed in a couple of ways. One of these was knowledge of self-efficacy. Now I know this statement on the screen is extensive, but to grasp what was going on in the psychology of these individuals, let us read it together. So Diana, one of the parents, described, basically, I felt happy. The first reason I was happy is that since I was born until I grew up and got married, I had never sat down with other people to discuss these issues. So I came to realize that, oh, so individuals who go to attend various seminars or research like this, they obtain this kind of knowledge. First, I learned and understood how to turn on a microphone. I learned how to take pictures, and I was able to listen to others' opinions. That is the first thing, the first benefit I got. I realized that as you continue to listen to others' views, you personally become more aware and open-minded. You get to understand that even if I didn't know something, this is how it can be explained. Personally, I learned many things from other participants. I gained the quickness to speak before people. Remember, you may know how to talk, but you wonder, can I speak in front of these people? But I became confident such that even when I go somewhere else, I can talk. I had never stood up and introduced myself, but there I picked up the microphone and introduced myself. It is like this. We often have women's groups, but in these groups of women, if there is no guest who has come to visit them, there are no introductions. But if you go somewhere else, introducing yourself is necessary. So that's why I had never introduced myself. To stand up, hold the microphone at my mouth and introduce myself that I am so and so from somewhere. The second way competence was expressed was through belief in personal ability. So as you read through this statement on the screen from one of the participants, Jackson, you realize there are three concepts being presented here. One is learning, the second one is taking action, and most importantly, the third one is about personal commitment to continuous action. Now, this was consistent with the literature which says that empowerment has to do with three things: thought, practice, and action. The third theme about autonomy was also expressed in a couple of ways. One was accessing knowledge. Now, as you see on the screen, we have two sides. On the left, we have the personal level explanation about accessing knowledge, and on the right side, we have the group level of affirmation about accessing knowledge. Why, as you read through these statements, let me explain why this is important. In the empowerment literature, it is emphasized that when you introduce an initiative into the community, in order for people to participate equitably, they need to access information, knowledge, and skills in order to make informed decisions about their participation so that they participate out of a sense of volition. And as you see in this statement, there were confirmations from the participants that they had access to knowledge, skills, and information. The second way autonomy was expressed was through a sense of volition, as I explained before, acting from a sense of self. Now, on the left side, we had the personal level sense of volition, and on the right side, we wanted to confirm a group level sense of volition. And as you can see, these statements indicate that most of the community partners acted out of a sense of control and freedom and choice, rather than being forced by external pressures. That confirmed that the individuals acted with a sense of volition in their participation. The second part of the findings has to do with the interpersonal empowerment. Now, this one, we developed two themes. One was Tumeshirikiana, Tumepata Matunda, which is a Swahili statement meaning we have collaborated, we have seen the results. And these were statements from the community partners themselves. Now, if you remember in the needs assessment, there was lack of collaboration and the desire to collaborate. Now, this theme here, we interpreted it as meaning that there was a sense of simultaneous satisfaction of the three innate basic psychological needs. The second theme was utekelezaji, or empowerment in action. This sense of urgency was expressed in a couple of ways. One was through congruence and synthesis with the self. One of the parents captured this concept when answering why he participated. He said, "The third reason as to why I decided to participate is generally related to my family, because there are certain things I was personally contemplating before I was invited to participate. I was asking myself, what can I do, or what kind of guidance can I get in order to do 1, 2, 3 things? But after receiving the information that there was this research initiative, I was motivated to participate so that I could acquire knowledge, and later I could bring that information or knowledge to benefit my family." The second way this sense of urgency or empowerment was expressed was through capacity to aspire, which means the ability of an individual to envision a better future. One of the teachers captured this concept, and although it's a long statement, let us read it so we can understand what was going on. She said, "First, at the beginning, I felt that this would be impossible. Then I thought that we would simply be wasting parents' time in vain, so much so that I didn't want to participate. But after seeing that parents had received a lot of awareness and they were coming here at school, I was like, all these parents coming here, I questioned, why not join them? So at first, the teachers were reluctant to go. But later, when we saw that the parents' motivation was very high, we felt it and we participated wholeheartedly. I am capable because I am going to be in charge. I am able to supervise well. I have the ability to provide education. I gained the capability through the research group because at first I didn't have the idea. We were trying to do it here, but we couldn't. If we make other plans beyond this stage, another plan I was envisioning would be to involve the whole community." The third way this sense of urgency was expressed was through personal affirmations of urgency or empowerment. As you read through these statements on the screen, let me elaborate one thing here. In the literature about empowerment, it is emphasized that as a researcher or a community development practitioner, you cannot confirm that a person or a group of people are empowered unless they themselves affirm it and validate it. So that's what we asked in this study, and the majority of the participants confirmed that they were feeling competent and committed. The second step was whether these feelings were associated with the initiative or something else. And again, most of the participants associated or ascribed their feelings of empowerment to the initiative. Only 2 participants attributed their feelings to other seminars and involvements in the community. The last theme, utekelezaji, this was captured by a statement from one of the community leaders. He stated, "I personally feel competent enough because of how we have been able to recognize the problems facing us. And I have the commitment to volunteer continuously in a variety of capacities and to engage the community beyond just our research group. And for what reason? It is because without further action, it means that even our research will be useless. So that's why we must continue so that we do not start something that is not permanently successful." Talking about action and success, we might be wondering, did these feelings of empowerment translate into some action? So let's find out some of the results. During the initiative, one of the things was identified was lack of students' food at school. This was conceived by participants as one of the most significant change issue they needed to collaborate to resolve. And so the first step, they called a 5-hour meeting where 170 parents attended. And during that meeting, they decided to establish and sustain a students' food program. So they organized over 200 people to clear the land and begin farming. They started started by farming sweet potatoes and later bananas, maize, and cassava. And then the parents also contributed over 300 kilograms of maize and an equivalent of $250 to support the program. And as a result of this community initiative, students began to eat nutritious food since February 2019. And as we speak today, this initiative is still ongoing. And so from the findings, there was evidence that there was individual and simultaneous satisfaction of the three basic psychological needs of relatedness, competence, and autonomy. However, there were three important findings about competence, time, and relatedness. Now, in the literature, competence is defined as self-efficacy, or the ability to do things with confidence and proficiency. In this study, competence was reflected as this idea of having voice or feeling heard and valued. And this finding was consistent with the prior research about psychological empowerment, where individuals who were assumed as being powerless were transitioning from a sense of powerless to a sense of commitment and participatory competence. They really expressed the importance of having somebody who listened to them, valued them, and treated them as human beings. And secondly, this finding was consistent with prior research which describes participatory approaches or methods as focusing on amplifying the voices of the participants or community members. And finally, this quote from Poor Men and Women in Villa, as quoted in Narayan 2005, really captured this concept that what the poor need is being valued and involved in the development process. The time taken to implement the initiative seemed to have reinforced and amplified individual and collective voice, therefore leading into the community partners feeling heard and valued. As we know, poverty does not happen overnight. It takes time, and therefore empowering the poor people to eradicate poverty will also take time. However, when we use top-down methods, which are normally used in development initiatives, there is a focus on efficiency with the predetermined goals and strict timeline. But efficiency does not necessarily mean effectiveness. So the findings of this study really insist that time is needed in order to build trust with the community members or the poor people in order for them to feel that they have voice and they can feel heard and valued in the process. The findings about relatedness were strong. However, this was not really surprising because in the literature, traditional non-Western cultures are described as being more communal, and also research has showed that personal empowerment, interpersonal, and the political empowerment are interconnected, which informs us why in the study, the participants would describe themselves as I, we, me, us. And finally, a recent study using self-determination theory and social identity theory found that when a person has a belief that their group is empowered, that belief reinforces that person's personal empowerment, which was consistent with the findings of this study. Now, the findings are the implications for theory. So, in the literature about empowerment, there has been these 5 decades of struggle on measuring empowerment as a process. So the findings of this study indicated that using urgency as the direct indicator of empowerment, self-determination theory approach could be assumed as a systematic and equitable universal measure for examining the empowerment process qualitatively. Implications for practice means that self-determination theory can be used to explain how and why empowerment happens or does not happen in initiatives towards eradicating poverty. Why? Because what this means is that for empowerment to happen, an initiative or intervention should create the opportunity structure which provides social contextual conditions, be it economic, social, cultural, that will allow for people to exercise their urgency. However, given the findings in this study, the use of this theory would require a definition of competence to include or integrate the idea of people having voice and feeling valued and heard. In conclusion, the findings of this study really demonstrated that it is possible to empower poor people in rural communities and also to measure whether the empowerment process has taken place. The findings also emphasize the critical element of time, which is needed to develop personal voice and ownership of the process in the development initiatives. So with that, these are some of my references. And I thought I would share some pictures here from the initiative. So on the top row, you can see the different meetings when the groups were meeting separately and together. And then on the left, that's when they came together with the other community members to start the farming at the school. On the right, that was in June after the first harvest, and the students are starting to enjoy food. And in the middle, you can see the smiles there, which would mean the students were happy about having food at school. So with that, I would like to thank you for your patience and for listening. And I would like to turn it to Professor Using. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Libe. And I actually did visit the village, and their smiling faces were very real. So on that, Libe, if you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen so we can have the gallery.